Good afternoon, everybody from XMA. We're about to start this webinar on 6 considerations for the new year for everybody. And we're just waiting to see all the names just shoot up. So we'll give people a minute to join and then we'll get started. Now, please feel free to ask any questions throughout the session. We've got a little minion, Gina, sitting in the back end, ready to answer any of your questions. I'm sure she'll appreciate that. And she can help answer any of your questions that you have, so walking through. And then there's time at the end, myself and the panel will have a look at some of those questions and see if we can feed back to you. If we can't feed back to you now, you've got your contact details and we will contact you directly with what we think would be a suitable answer.
Can't believe you just called her a minion.
It's all right. I know she'll get me back. She'll get me back. She'll be very quiet. Okay, let's just get started then. My name is Michael Conlon. I'm a transformation consultant here at XMA. And I work with schools and local authorities, multi-academy trusts to think about how they're integrating technology for learning and teaching and how they can transform their schools and their young people and give them the kind of support they need in order to meet the challenges of a digital landscape going forward. So we had lots of seminars and webinars from March onwards, really successful. And so this is our first one of the year, and I'm really pleased that we've been joined by other human beings in the space, rather than just looking at applications and working through how we can use them. We want to have those conversations with real teachers and leaders about how to navigate over the next year, 2 years and beyond, and leverage the technology to create really meaningful, relevant and engaging experiences for young people, regardless of what the virus does across the UK and indeed the world. And when we talk about the challenges that have been faced with 1.7 billion young people, young students have been removed from their education system at a very sharp and quick rate, and then how do we cope with that? How did we then address the needs for the continuity in learning that we know is so important for them to find a pathway to success for their future and the kind of choices and chances that they make going forward. So I'm really pleased to be joined by some colleagues from across the UK. I'll first of all introduce you to Stuart Clyde. Stuart, welcome to XMA in your first webinar. Stuart, could you give us an overview of what you do? You're a head teacher in Scotland. Could you give us an overview of the school you lead, Bertha Park, and your role within it?
Hi everyone, my name's Stuart. Thanks a lot for inviting me along to be with you today, to everyone at XMA. I'm head teacher at Bertha Park High School, which is in the middle of Scotland in Perth. We are one of the only flagship schools in the world, so we accrued the status of Microsoft flagship school, and we are the first brand new school to have opened in Scotland in about the past 20 years. Now, there's been a lot of new school buildings open in Scotland, but we are the first brand new school without being a replacement building. So that gave us a lot of challenges because we had to build absolutely everything from scratch. So we had no values, vision, ethos, aims, curriculum, staff, technology, and we had to build absolutely everything from the ground up, which gave us a really unique opportunity to be able to question absolutely everything, because there wasn't a way that we had always done things. There wasn't a a fixed mindset of the staff, because we had no staff. So we made sure we had the right people on the bus, and we challenged every aspect of setting up a school to say, why do we do this? Do we do it because we've always done it that way, or is it the right way to do it? And right at the heart of what we wanted to do was build a school fit for the 21st century, and of course the technology surrounds what that actually looks like. So we took a lot of time to look at other people's practice, to look at schools and colleges right around the world to see what they were doing, and pick the best bits of practice and put it all together in what we think is a real learning establishment for the 21st century. We're learning all the time, but we're really pleased with what we've set up for the past year now. We've been open just over a year, and it's going really well. So I'm delighted to be here and looking forward to contributing a bit later on.
Cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to I never got to come up to Bertha Park when it first opened, and I'd love to come up and kind of visit and see what you're doing, because I'm kind of stuck in Glasgow all the time or further south. So yeah, but my name's Lee Milligan. For those of you who have watched webinars before, I'm usually on this. But I lead up the digital learning team, mostly in Glasgow, but I've been working, especially since kind of COVID's happened, more and more down south with multi-academy trusts, but tend to work with local authorities, primary, secondary, really looking at the kind of high quality learning and teaching, the strategy, the vision, the planning, and helping with professional learning of staff, which I think is just so crucial. That's what I'm really passionate about, is really investing in staff so that they can then give the best learning and teaching opportunities to our young learners. So yeah, and we've got Lisa here. So Lisa, could you please introduce yourself and kind of your role within where you work, etc.? Please.
Thanks, Lee. So thank you for having me as well. Hello, everybody. I'm Lisa Hawker. I'm Head of IT at ARK. ARK is an international charity transforming lives for education. In the UK, we exist to give every young person, regardless of their background, great opportunity, a great education and real choices in life. We are a multi-academy trust of 38 schools, educating around 28,000 pupils.
That's phenomenal, isn't it? That kind of number.
Yeah, so it's a huge number. And in terms of the role, I'm responsible for multiple things, including the IT strategy. We deliver the IT service to our schools. It's a hybrid service that we work in partnership to deliver with XMA, and a programme of projects.
Fantastic. And I know all of us have faced our own, personal and professional challenges in during COVID, and those still exist in many ways. But Stuart, when you think about you as a head teacher and the role that you had, how did you cope with those challenges that very sudden, we're now on lockdown? How did that affect you as a school and as a head teacher? And how did you overcome them? Was there anything about your school that gave it an advantage over the others, for example?
Well, yes, I do believe there was. We were determined to make sure that from the moment that the schools closed down, that we could deliver our full curriculum remotely. And the way that we'd established Bertha Park High about 6 months earlier, 6-7 months beforehand, this time last year, last August actually, the way that we had set up our teaching and learning, our virtual learning environment, and our use of one-to-one devices and the Microsoft Office suite, particularly Teams and OneNote, whilst everybody else was scrambling around trying to learn how to work these things because the schools had closed, that was actually just our bread and butter. We've been doing that since last August. So when the schools closed down, it was really just a case of us taking the tools that we were already familiar with and that were already working for us, and actually just using them remotely. So we didn't have to teach the kids or the staff how to use Teams or OneNote or any other part of the virtual learning environment and all the other apps that we use, because we were using those day in, day out. What we did do was just make the content more accessible without necessarily constant face-to-face. So the schools here closed on the 20th of March, and on the 23rd of March, which was the following Monday, we launched our remote timetable. And the kids were still timetabled to be in every single one of their classes for about 50, 60 minutes in slots for Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday. So we created a whole remote timetable, and the teachers knew exactly when they were required to be online. They knew that they had to get their content organised and make everything available through the Office 365 suite. And we had a really, really good uptake. But I think that was because we did a lot of that thinking before COVID was a thing. So this time last year we thought, right, this is how the best of industry works. This is how forward-thinking organisations and universities and colleges work. Why are schools still stuck in the dark ages? You know, why are we constantly preparing young people blissfully for life in the 20th century? We left that 20 years ago, but from what we see, schools are continuing to do things the way they always did things, and it's really about time, I think, that we started looking forward and saying we need to prepare kids for the way that life in the real world works, which is very much the way that we operate Bertha Park High now. So I think that put us at a distinct advantage when the schools closed in March.
Yeah, and I think although challenging, it's really now pushed schools, because we've had COVID, to go, right, okay, could this come back? Could there be a resurgence? And we need to be ready for if it comes back. And so schools are more ready because they've been pushed to get that strategy in place. But you were obviously very lucky that you already kind of knew what you were doing. So Lisa, what about you, kind of multi-academy trust? What challenges did you really face during COVID, and how did you overcome them then?
So similarly, we devised a strategy in 2018. We had high aspirations of serverless schools, and we defined a critical path of how we was going to achieve that, which meant in real terms about being cloud first. And we created a vision that in order to meet those aspirations around anytime, anywhere, and a consistent user experience, which was about devising, cloud platforms, and as Stuart has said, whatever that your VLE looks like. So we used SharePoint sites. We had Microsoft Teams that we've been using internally for some time. So similarly, when COVID did strike and schools did go into lockdown, we was prepared. Maybe not as prepared in terms of the staff training, but we were prepared. The platforms were available to use, and we was able to launch those. Obviously, some of the challenges that we had were about uptake and utilization. So, some of the challenges that we had early on was, and that Microsoft was suffering with actually in terms of the Office 365 platforms, was the inconsistency of the availability of it. So people, systems were a little bit up and down in the first few days. Some of the other challenges were obviously in like telephony, and again we'd implemented a Microsoft Teams solution where we had telephony fully embedded as a platform. So it was our telephony solution for the head office, so we were just able, that was a cloud-based solution anyway, so it didn't matter whether anybody was in the office, people were able to use it remotely. But what that meant was more people wanted to have telephony licenses and things like that. But again, it was just demand. Some of the technical challenges that we faced, we managed through a risk approach. So we looked at what potential risks we had coming in the 6 months. So, for example, we'd thinking about what happens if we can't get our staff and pupils back into schools. What does that mean for people who are working at home? Luckily, people had their devices at home and they was able to access platforms, etc. But what could stop working? And one of those things that we was concerned about was the licensing, just because of the way that our Microsoft licensing works. It's only valid for 180 days. So we was looking at scaling up solutions that could mitigate some of those challenges, which we were able to do really quickly.
Yeah, and so interesting, and the technology is so important. And I know, Stuart, at your school, having that one-to-one program really, made that ease of transition an awful lot easier for you. But we've now started a new year in Scotland, and I know a lot of our colleagues down in England and Northern Ireland and Wales are busy preparing for that, or maybe have already just started. So in the new academic year then, what challenges do you expect to encounter, and how are you planning for this? Because I'm sure you've had those kind of discussions.
We're actually already starting to see some demand for remote learning, even though the schools are completely back, because for one reason or another, and there's a dozen reasons out there why there are certain numbers of young people not in school still. Some are still self-isolating because of the medical background that they have, or perhaps a family member has. Some of them are self-isolating because they might have a positive person at home. Even out with COVID, there's a million reasons why young people can't actually attend school. So the demand for us to almost kickstart our remote learning again is already there. Okay, it's not school-wide, but there's still an expectation that we were able to churn this out from March to June quite successfully. So can you continue to do it? So the challenge there is being able to balance both things, because we still have the face-to-face young people in the school itself, but we're also being expected to keep that level of remote learning going. But again, using the VLEs that we used over the past year, that has made that more accessible, because whatever the teacher is using in real time with the young people in front of them in a classroom is also available at that very same moment to somebody that's at home. And we have broadcasts, live broadcasts from school. We've got tutorial times where you can have two-way conversations between the people out with the school and the staff in place. But I think having that equity of opportunity, so that everybody has the same device, everybody has equal access to everything, and just making sure that we don't have two systems in operation. We don't have one set of resources for face-to-face teaching, and then you have to go and invent another set of resources to do it remotely. It's all just the one thing. Absolutely, and everybody just taps into it wherever they are. And it was like Lisa said a little while ago, it's like anytime, anywhere learning. And that's been really, really important to us. It doesn't matter where you are. So even after COVID hopefully disappears, the skills that we have learned for people that can't physically access the school in person, the skills that we've learned should be part and parcel of what we do on an everyday business for people out with the school building.
Yeah, and it's so exciting to hear that we're now able to deliver lessons remotely whilst we've got a class in front of us face to face, because a few years back that would have been, whoa, I'm not doing that.
It was difficult to see educational innovation, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was difficult to see.
Yeah, and even just getting past your classroom or your department, it's allowed us as teachers to kind of really share great practice and really work together. So, but it's really interesting hearing kind of your stance, Stuart, as a head teacher, but obviously Lisa, you're kind of infrastructure techie. So what are the challenges? I mean, you've got one, you were telling us one school is back, and then you've got all your other schools back very soon. So what are the challenges you're kind of preparing for with them all coming back?
So just in terms of our strategy for the last 2 years, it has been very much focused on standardisation in a number of key areas. And bearing in mind 3 years ago, not all of our teachers had a device in their hand. We did absolutely concentrate on providing the right tools to the teachers. So as we come to the end of this strategy now, we are focusing very much on the pupils. And actually, just over the summer, we have myself and my colleague Lauren Thorpe, who's Director of Strategy at ARK, are working on a new digital strategy, which is about pupils and one-to-one devices, because as Stuart said, it's about one of the challenges that we had educationally was about the inequity of devices, particularly in our children, you know, in a lot of our children in areas of severe deprivation, etc. So as our schools return, it's about deployment of probably more closer to 10,000 devices. I think that from a teaching and learning perspective, it's the challenge of making sure that the teachers have the skills. As you've said, it's important that they have the skills that they need. And part of our digital strategy is going to be on addressing a specific issue, which will be about more time for teaching in the classroom, so that the fact that they'll have these devices at home for homework, that they'll be able to spend more quality time, and also that will affect the teacher workload. So there's some of the challenges that we're looking to address in the autumn term as part of the digital strategy.
Yeah. Now, I know that someone had said earlier that some of the skills that young people are developing through this are not pandemic skills. They are, you know, skills for life learning and work. Lee and I were talking about that earlier on. It was really giving me an awful lot of clarity, because it's absolutely correct. I know, Stuart, in your school, when you came up with and designed Bertha Park as a community, it was built with the community very much part of how that school, because it was not only a new building, but a new community that surrounded that in terms of housing and other things and infrastructure. What role does technology play in the fact that all of you young people have got their own device that they can take home? What role does that technology play in your ability to build a community better and to connect families together in a way that perhaps would be much more challenging otherwise?
Well, I think when we went into a remote learning phase, the fact that everybody had the same device, and that device was a robust device which gave us minimal amount of grief connecting to the internet and receiving this remote learning, took away an enormous amount of stress from how we're going to do this, who's got an Android device, who's got an Apple device, who's working from a desktop, who's working from a laptop, and all the different connotations. We had the same thing for absolutely everybody. We had Apple iPads. They were very new Apple iPads running robust software. The apps that we were using were pretty much the Office suite of apps and a few extras, and they worked pretty much seamlessly. And the odd glitch that we had was able to be sorted over the phone. So that took an enormous amount of stress away from getting the system up and running. And if we were to look at other schools that didn't have that, they were busy trying to find devices, borrowing or stealing devices and getting them out to the kids so they could take part. That wasn't even an issue. We were able to go from day one with that because we had this equity of device. But not only that, reaching out to parents and building up that sense of community meant that they could then engage with the staff of the school through the kids' devices. So there wasn't this hassle of how do you actually engage parents. We could, through the kids' device, actually speak with them, video conference with them. We're actually currently looking at what the parents' evenings look like now. So yeah, okay, schools are back in, but we can't flood the school with fresh adults coming in that could be bringing all sorts, so that has to be done remotely. How do we do that? Well, we're going to do it through the kids' own devices and build up that sense of community. The relationship between the parents and the school is so key to making things like this work, and I feel it's an area that really hasn't been developed enough. So we do try and involve the wider community, but in particular our parents, winning hearts and minds, bringing them on board with what they're doing, making them feel listened to, making them feel included, and that can all be facilitated through the kids' devices that we gave them.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It is actually quite exciting what can be done, especially when you're pushed into a situation where you have to think differently about things. And so kind of the infrastructure piece then, as a teacher, you don't want to have to kind of think about, is this going to work? You just want to be able to get a device. Also, as a parent, as a child with a one-to-one device, you want to just be able to switch it on and get on with your work. So what are you kind of doing up in ARK to kind of make sure the content, like the learning continues, that the infrastructure can cope with that? What kind of things are you doing?
So, I mean, the infrastructure was the foundation of how we built our strategy, because there's no point in devising teaching and learning strategies built on tech when you haven't, invested in your infrastructure. So it's really important that we invested in what we determined to be the plumbing. Let's get the plumbing right first. And actually that has been proven, right? Because, if we'd have gone, as Stuart said, he was ready in August last year. In October last year, we moved our data center out of our office because we was moving offices, and we changed our authentication to Office 365, meaning that no matter where you were, you could just authenticate. Some of these things alongside the infrastructure were the transformational pieces that allowed us to all continue working as soon as COVID and lockdown happened, and will continue to do so. So, 3 years ago, we had a disparate set of schools on different domains, which means, in almost like in different islands, nothing was connected together. So we decided to concentrate on 5 key areas around standardization, which was on the server infrastructure. Remember, we provide the IT service for our schools, so it's just as important to have standardization, not only for our IT team, for the technical team, so that they could go into any school and be able to support it, but also for our teachers, that they can, and our own central staff, that they can move around any school, and it's exactly the same. So again, it's wherever, enabling you to work wherever you are, a consistent user experience, it's exactly the same. So we concentrated on the standardization of the servers, the connectivity, we're all on the same wide area network. switching and Wi-Fi. One of the most transformational pieces of standardization that we did was roaming Wi-Fi. So for all of our, so whether you're in our central office or in one of our schools, you're just automatically connect to the Wi-Fi's. So across about 45 different locations, it doesn't matter, you don't need to do anything. You take your device, you walk into the building, and you're just able to work. So as I say, and those things, you know, people, teachers and our senior leadership team still stop me and say that it's, you know, it's the most fantastic thing as an enabler to just be able to work. There's no delays and you can just get on and work. So, you know, the infrastructure parts are the complete enabler. And now that we've done the enabling and that teachers have had their one-to-one device and have been able to use the platforms and services, it puts them in better stead now for the digital strategy for a one-to-one device with a pupil, that everybody's much more au fait with being able to take on new technologies and strategies with the pupils.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, infrastructure is something we speak a lot about in XMA, obviously, because that's part of our business too, a huge part of our business. And I've often said that, you know, is it fair for young people to have a better experience in a coffee shop than they do have in their own school? You know, that seems like madness to me, quite frankly, because they're the next generation who will lead the economic future of this country. I wanted to just before we move on, just to think and reflect back on what we saw from teachers at the beginning of the lockdown, and just the change and the massive hill they had to climb to get their heads around some of these new technologies and some of the software, and the massive effort they put into that to making sure that children come first. And I'm so proud of all my teaching colleagues over all the schools I've ever taught, and the profession in general, who really stood up and just cracked on, you know. And what it proved to them, because I've spoken to lots of them and to myself, is that they have the capacity for change, which is relentless. So I think for us moving forward, we know we've got a group of teachers out there who are capable of making that kind of leap. Sometimes it felt like into the dark, but they are absolutely capable of taking digital technology forward through learning and teaching. And I think that's been a big lesson to us all. And I think one of the other lessons has been about, for us, about the need for transformation across educational institutions. And we're seeing a real thirst now for people to start exploring how you develop a new normal, how you leverage some of the benefits they saw actually from young people working at home and what they got from it, what new skills they developed. How do we build a resilient education system that can, as in Stuart's case, you know, as soon as it happens, you can switch straight back over to remote learning and then bring them back in. You know, he will have that flexibility. We know that lockdown really revealed quite starkly a digital gap amongst families. And what it revealed is that, you know, some young people didn't have access to technology. They can't just look up something and find something out, or put pictures together and make videos, because they might have a data cap, or they might have a device, or it might be a device that's shared by the family. These are real issues that were happening across this country. So now we really see a real thirst from leaders and from local authorities and heads talking about how we can make sure that that digital gap is closed, so that there's no danger of it influencing an attainment gap, which can sometimes exist and maybe has existed for some people through the lack of access. So XMA, I'm just going to switch over to I'll show my main screen. You can hopefully all see that a little slide. So yep. We've been exploring, looking at some 6 considerations for your digital strategy this year, both in the short term and in the long term. If you're thinking about how do we move to one-to-one, how do we evolve our strategy that includes that sort of model, that means that we have a really rich, resilient system for our school and for our young people. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you to these 6 considerations. I'll give you a brief introduction to why we've been thinking about those things, and then ask you to chip in about your own thoughts there. And the first one really is to start with why. You know, if you're going to develop a vision for this, it has to be rock solid, and it has to be something that people actually believe in, and that they really deeply understand the need for a change like this. So when you look at some of the things that went on, some of the, the collaboration between young people and the creativity, their independence of learning, their changes in developing skills in communication and sharing, and maybe creating responses to learning, showing what they know in ways that they maybe haven't been able to do before. Where does learning happen and when does it happen? So I'm talking to some young people and they said, we actually like it that I can choose when I do my maths. So I can do my maths at 4 o'clock, or if I'm better in, I'm more interested in doing my modern languages at 8 o'clock at night, then I'll do it then. I've got some independence about how I organize my learning. And that independence really showed through in terms of the response they were giving to the learning that was being asked of them, the kind of quality they were being asked for. There was also some young people who spoke about, when I'm at school, I know what table I'm at. I'm at the blue table. I know that I'm not at the top table. I'm way down. And when I'm given work, I reflect on that and where I'm sitting. But when I'm at home, the only competition for me is myself. So it's just me and the stimulus and me being able to create a response in ways that I want to, and not just in the way that the teacher wants me. I've got some options here. And that was really revealing to me that for some young people, this really suited them. So when we think about our school, the way we organise school and schooling, are we meeting everybody's needs in terms of the way that they work? And I was also really, really thrilled by the number of young people who found that technology was the learning support for them. So if you've got, a challenge like dyslexia, for example, the technology can support you with that, perhaps by reading out the text or the web pages for you so that you can follow along and get to the heart of the learning that you want. So when technology can empower young people in that way, I think it's our duty, quite frankly, to leverage that technology to make sure that they have the kind of learning support that they need wherever and whenever they are. I don't know if any of you want to chip into that why part of it, why we're doing these things. Stuart, maybe?
We started when we were establishing Bertha Park High School before we opened with asking that very question about absolutely everything, Michael. Why do everything? Not only why are we introducing, one-to-one technology, why are we in a digitally immersive school? Not only that, but why are we doing everything? There's so much, and I know this to be true in Scottish education, but there's so much of what is done in Scottish education purely because it's the way it's always been done, and starting a whole school from scratch that has no history, it has nothing that's gone before it to say, oh, that's the way we do things around here, son. It gave a unique opportunity to say, actually, no, we can question everything. We can question how the children learn, what means do they learn through, what kind of technology do we want to have, why do we want to have that technology, why do we have bells in a school? Children are not Pavlov's dogs. We don't need to have bells ringing so they salivate at the right time and know when to get, because that's not how the world works. So it was all about, again, winning hearts and minds and giving the system a really good shake and saying, why are we doing all these things? What is the purpose? Is it because it's comfortable for us because it's the way that we learned, it's the way that our school day was structured? The kids come in at 9 o'clock and they leave at 3:30 and this is what they do? Or is this a unique opportunity to actually think, wait a minute, let's challenge everything that we thought is the way forward? If maybe it is the right thing to do, but have you actually asked yourself that question? Have you asked that of your community? Why are we doing it like this? And that's what we did with every aspect of setting up our school. And people thought that this was, quite a unique way of looking at things, and oh, it's a fancy school, they're setting up their school with all sorts of immersive technology. It's not really that fancy. That's the way the world works. We were just trying to drag education into the 21st century, whether it liked it or not. But that whole principle of why was a blanket statement for us in absolutely everything that we did.
Yeah, I suppose when I go into schools as well and go in and talk to them about a potential one-to-one deployment or even shared deployment, wherever, that is the question that I ask them a lot. They look to me a lot of the times and say, so what can we do, Lee? What should we do? And I go, no, that's not why I'm here. I'm here to facilitate a discussion, to ask you about what are you doing at the moment? What have you learned that works really well? and tell me about it, and I'll question whether maybe you could tweak that a little bit. And it's not me that comes up with the answers a lot of the time. I'd love to say it is. It's actually, they know the answers in their heads. You know your kids, you know your staff better than anybody, and it just takes somebody to kind of, listen and kind of help and tweak things. So what about you, Lisa? What's kind of ARK been doing?
So I mean, some if you think about some of the whys, I mean, I've had some of those questions about why. So 3 years ago, when there had been little or no investment, and there were failing and slow devices, and we're an organisation of high aspirations. Our values say aim high or high aspirations, but why would you provide out of date failing kit that doesn't work and expect to achieve high outcomes? And that was my why. Why would you do that? And so we have invested in those things because it's about the people. It's about making sure that a teacher has the right toolkit to do their job. It's about the pupil having the right toolkit to be able to do their job and achieve high outcomes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And that ties really neatly into the next part of what we've been talking about at XMA, in around infrastructure and that consistent user experience. Because I know, and I'm sure we all know, teachers who, if it doesn't work, they're willing to give it a go, but see if it keeps failing them in a classroom, for example, then they tend not to want to need it again. And that's absolutely understandable, because there's nothing worse as a teacher than feeling foolish that things aren't working, and that the plan that you had for learning didn't materialize because the technology let you down. And so when you, Lisa, talk about infrastructure and your understanding that that's going to make everything happen, for teachers, that's absolutely critical. We know that infrastructure doesn't always just talk about what's happening at school. I think when we saw the digital gap that was being exacerbated by the lockdown, for example, we needed to start thinking about connectivity at home, because a lot of the things that we want to do, whether it's through Teams or Google Classroom or through Apple collaboration tools, it's about do I have the connectivity and the data to allow those kind of experiences to happen? If I want to send some of these children to a museum, a virtual museum, in France or Denmark, wherever we want to go, do they have the data in order to be able to do that? And we'd been talking about, should we start thinking as a society, never mind just as schools, as connectivity has been something which should be a utility, which goes to homes as part of, like water and gas and electricity and things like that. Stuart, I wonder, could you talk us through the infrastructure designs that happened at Bertha Park? I know for the team there in Perth and Kinross, this was a massive big project that they really wanted to get absolutely right, because eventually you're going to have 1,000 students roaming around that building.
Yeah, we started off in reverse. What did we want the teaching and learning to look like? What do we need to happen? And then backtrack and say, well, what do we need to put in place to make that happen eventually? And Lisa's spoken for about how important it was for her to set up the infrastructure for her schools, and it is absolutely crucial to that. It was really nice to hear Lisa saying that, and how important it is. We actually sussed out that there was 3 things that were super important, the infrastructure being one of them, getting the right people on the bus, getting the hearts and minds of the staff ready to deliver this, and making the pedagogy, the learning the right way for digital devices, because you absolutely just can't throw devices at a regular curriculum and expect miracles to happen. That the learning has to be devised around those. But what we did at Bertha Park with the infrastructure was say to our local authority IT folk, this is what we want to do. We want to have a one-to-one devices strategy. Eventually, as Michael said, we want to have over 1,000 people in the building at the one time, all potentially accessing large bandwidth Wi-Fi. And they took a step back and thought, wait, well, that's not the way that we were thinking of designing the infrastructure for Bertha Park. Well, that's the way we need it to go. So because we had that thinking process done a year or 18 months, in fact, before the school was due to open, they could then go back and redesign the network and put in place the infrastructure that would be needed. And it was a real challenge for them because no other school in our local authority works that way, and that none of the networks had been designed to do that. The wireless access points, there weren't enough in the original design. You know, we had to go back and make sure that there was going to be seamless wireless connectivity for a lot of people everywhere, just like perhaps a shopping centre or a stadium. But it was a real challenge for them, and they really enjoyed that challenge. They said, well, it's not the way we thought it was going to go, but that's great. We've got the time now to be able to look forward and plan it. And 18 months down the line, I can say that my colleagues at Perth and Ross Council IT did an absolutely immense job with designing our infrastructure, because from day one, the devices have all worked just about flawlessly. And that teacher and pupil experience, that they get their fingers burnt when it doesn't work and think, oh, do you know what, let's just look at the overhead projector and get your jotters out and open up your textbooks. That didn't happen, and it doesn't happen. Of course, it's not absolutely perfect, and every now and then you're going to have something keeling over, but 99% of the time, it is absolutely 100% spot on.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, we just want to be able to enable people to do the best job that they can. So whether that's, you know, teachers being able to get in front of class and like use those devices and not think about it, just like getting out a textbook, basically, it shouldn't be difficult. It should just be, let's get on with the lesson, you know, and that's you on. And even you can move around the school. I'm sure you do that as well at Bertha Park. That you're not just stuck to the classroom either. You're thinking of the school as a whole community, that you can allow those kids to go, right, let's go and do a project, but let's go somewhere else. Let's do a scavenger hunt or whatever. And it just opens up your classroom to more than just your classroom or your school even further on. So, and you've kind of answered kind of infrastructure thing, Lisa. So I don't know if we're on to kind of professional kind of learning we were going to touch on a little bit, Michael.
Yes, just to say that one of the things that I've always thought about, you know, IT teams, and Lisa, you too, is that, do you understand what an important part you play in a young person's future too? Because the work that you do can directly influence the experience a young person has in a classroom. And even though you'll never meet them and you'll never see them, you should know that you absolutely have a massive part to play in their future.
Absolutely, and actually what we're talking about here is, with our one-to-one device strategy initially, is extending that beyond school. And I know that there's been, you know, there's been an up until this point, and we talk about innovation, and there's an expectation that all young people have digital skills. They can use a phone, they can, you know, they can pick up an iPad, but that's very different to the functional skills that they've actually learned through this process, and by having devices in their hands and being able to navigate different types of learning styles. I think that hopefully that we're impacting much more beyond the school gates.
Yeah, that's really important, because most kids can pick up a device if they've got a device. Not all kids do, but a lot of kids do. But generally they use it to chat or to go into the internet. That's not, you know, 21st digital skills. It's a good start. And I hear a lot of teachers also say to me, oh, but the kids know more than me. I'm like, they don't actually know more than you. And don't be scared to try out new things type thing. So that's, yeah. But yeah, we need people like you, Lisa, in the background doing all that hard work.
Absolutely. And it was, just moving on from that, when we're talking about professional learning, and I always harp on about this and bore people senseless, but talking about, you know, devices don't teach children, teachers teach children. All the pedagogical understanding and the deep understanding about how people learn, educational psychology, and what actually goes on in a learning environment is so much more important in many ways than the device itself. What the device will do is it will provide you as with a teacher and a learner to create more authentic, engaging, relevant, meaningful experiences that you already do, you know, because we're not chucking out the baby with the bathwater here. There's lots of pedagogical practice and instructional direct instruction, which are absolutely massively, you know, important to what successful learning happen, you know, how it actually happens. But technology is going to provide you and your young people with a broader range of opportunities to show what they know, to model ideas and learning. And really, we should always, as a teacher, have the opportunity to leverage whatever's out there in order to make and support our young people in their learning. So when we talk about investment and we talk about financial capital investment in technology, and it seems like it's all just about tin, it's not about tin, it's about investing in people. And when you invest in our young people and you invest in our teachers, what you're doing actually is investing in your local economy, because you're working to help develop the digital skills that young people are going to need to exist in the 21st century economy, especially with we know there's going to be tightening economical challenges in the next year, 2 and 5 years time. So can we make sure that our young people are as digitally adept as they possibly can be, so that they can access whatever they want to access in terms of their future employment and learning opportunities? So when we look at Bertha Park then, Stuart, and we think about, well, how am I going to get my staff, these brand new staff, to a place where they are confident with their with the technology, so that they can lead the learning and leverage the power of the technology that we know that it has?
To begin with, we had 14 members of staff, and that was all. We were starting off with a very, very small number of young people. So we had 14 what we call in Scotland principal teachers, heads of department, and we managed to bring them on staff about 2 months ahead of them actually having to go face to face with the young people, which is almost unheard of in education. But such was the support from the local authority behind what we were trying to do, it was worthwhile getting those members of staff off timetable, working together, learning how to utilise all this great technology, and XMA were a huge part in supporting us with that training and working out how to best deliver it, that when the school opened, we really hit the ground running. Then there's the added pressure, though, of keeping those skills up and improving on those skills. And through working with the devices and working with the apps and the resources that we had access to, they became more comfortable in that, which then led on to the schools closing down in March. And I seen there was a question come in there about did the teachers' confidence grow in using technology, or were they already good at it? Well, it was actually a bit of both. The staff were confident enough. We actually set our stall out before we even hired the teachers. We set our stall out for recruitment to say, this is the kind of school that we are going to set up. These are the skills that you're going to need. We did a recruitment in a completely different way, a digitally immersive way, so that it deliberately looked and sounded different from lots of other types of recruitment. So the staff actually knew what they were getting themselves into before they even put the application form in. And that has helped whittle down the right people for the task in itself. Where we've noticed our next challenge is we've now taken on about another dozen members of staff that haven't had that benefit of 2 months worth of intensive training in these devices, but they're immersed in that now, and they're surrounded by colleagues that have got these skills, and we're having to set time aside to make sure that they are as up to speed with the rest of the colleagues that have been here for over a year now. But there's that expectation that that's just the way we do things around here now. So it's not like, oh, I better brush up my skills because I'll need to use an iPad every now and then. That's at the very heart of our learning. That this virtual learning environment is the way that we deliver our education, and that high expectation of new coming members of staff helps set them up on a really, really clear path to get up to date with our tech, and it's great watching it grow.
And have these the new staff that have come on, were they at a certain level? Had they done like Apple Teacher, or were they MIEs or something? Did you at least expect that, or were you just looking for great teachers who are able to then take that on board?
A little of both. Even the recruitment of the new members of staff, we try to make the recruitment process look and feel that little bit different, that little bit more digitally immersive, so that they go, oh, this doesn't look or feel like the interview that I did last week for another job. So they know what they're getting themselves into. But we also say at the point of appointment, it would be a really good idea for you to go and do your MIE course, or get educated in Apple Classroom. These are the kind of skills that you're going to need in 6 weeks' time when you join us. You better hit the ground running. And even before they're on staff, we'll include them on the whole staff team. So when they log into Teams, they're actually a part of the staff, even though they're not actually in our building yet, but they get to see the chat going around, they get to feel how the place works and how our communication system works. So by the time they actually step in, they know what's expected of them.
Yeah,
and of course
so important.
the young people do an awful lot of the teaching as well. Once they've got a whole new set of skills and are more than quite happy to share with teachers the best use of the devices in the classroom. And speaking of young people and thinking about their safety, I guess when we look at when we give devices and personal devices to young people and we allow them to take them home, for example, we've still got a responsibility in terms of safeguarding, and it's our responsibility when we hand over something like that to make sure that those devices are set up in such a way and managed in such a way that allows us to have some comfort that we're not enabling some, we're not giving them, the kind of applications, your Snapchats and all the rest of it. We want them to use devices for learning and for being creative and creating new assets and things that didn't exist before, and moving away from consumption towards creation. So Lisa, when you set up devices across your establishments, what kind of work do you have to do to make sure those devices are managed wisely?
I mean, obviously, when they're on our domain, it's much simpler. I think, we've been looking at the challenges of how we provide an equitable solution of what we have in our schools for the students when they're at home. So some of the things that we've looked, I mean, we're actually going to be providing Google Chromebook. So, the configuration of the devices and what's being allowed, we are allowing certain controls to be determined by schools. So, are they going to allow social media to be used on these devices? We can lock it completely down. One of the things that has been really useful for us that's a new product is that our connectivity provider, which is the London Grid for Learning, we've got a Home Protect filtering, so we're able to extend the filtering that's available across our establishments and extend that to being used at home. And also a monitoring solution so that we can still continue to monitor the activity of what's being done. And we're actually using a really good cloud-based product called Censo Safeguard Monitoring.
Yeah,
but there is no perfect solution. There is no perfect solution.
No, there is no, and I think sorry, Lee.
No, just saying there's no one size fits all, is there? And if you think like that, then you're on to a losing street. You've got to think about what you need, what the kids need, what your staff needs, and then center something around that, be strategic like that.
Yeah, and you need to have a dialogue.
Yeah,
you need to have a dialogue with your community, with your families, with young people themselves and your staff, to make sure you've got the right solution that works for everybody and everybody understands their responsibility and role in the safeguarding of young people and around digital technology. And I know one of the questions we had about what one-to-one devices are the best are being looked at right now. Well, we in XMA across the estates, from Google, Chromebooks and iPads and laptops and other hero devices from Microsoft, we see a whole host of approaches being taken, and most of it starts by thinking about what do you want the learning to look like. And that's a school decision, isn't it, really, about thinking about what do we want learning to look like here? What can we investigate all platforms and look across them all and find out which one is going to work for us best? And I think that's important that dialogue happens. Looking at, we've spoken about, financial challenges in the years ahead, and there's going to have to be a sustainable future for some of these things, and one-to-one programs and the like, and the infrastructure investment. It's very difficult certainly as a leader of learning, to enable somebody with a device, for example, and to empower them with that to meet their own learning goals, etc., and then to disempower them. I mean, that's to take it off somebody's really, really challenging. So when we speak to schools and local authorities and academy trusts, we talk in detail about making this a sustainable program for the way you move forward in learning and teaching. And Lisa, I don't know how you spoke earlier about that sustainability model and the challenges of making sure that any investment that's made is made for the right decisions and still continues to innovate. What's your thinking around that?
I mean, so everything we did at the start, my I think people got sick of me saying it needs to be sustainable. The fact is that, you know, as I said, you know, if you at the organisation of little or no investment for a number of years, you buy something, if you don't build in a sustainable plan for that, then you're going backwards straight away. So it's absolutely pointless. You're not going to get your return on investment. So everything that we did early on, as we encouraged schools to standardise and to procure, we had a sustainable plan. So that what that looked like is that either whether it was a switch in the school and it had a 7-year life cycle, that we were showing the schools that in 7 years you're going to need to invest again. So we had a continual refresh plan that spanned 5, 7, 10 years. And actually that's fully embedded. Within 2 years we was able to mandate the cost of the sustainability of the programme going forward into school budget. So there's never a surprise, and that enables you to continue to provide a sustainable plan. And likewise with the new digital strategy and the one-to-one programme, you know, we're going to start in 2 areas this year, one in academic intervention and in a full-scale pilot for year 4 and year 7. And actually what we're saying is that in the next 4 years, we're expecting that all pupils will have a one-to-one device. And what that looks like is that we're showing the costs each year of what the year 4 and the year 7 cost looks like. So we've, at the same time as launching the strategy, we're saying these are going to be your annual costs, and we talk to our regional finance directors about making sure that those costs are mandated in budgets so that it's all incorporated, so there's never any surprises.
Yep. And thanks for that. We know we're quickly running out of time, so we'll just finish off with the last one, which is really, it was just really about building community. We want to make sure that when people are looking at approaches like this, that they think beyond the benefits to the school and think about the benefits to the community and the kind of projects that can take place when you have that sort of understanding that everyone's going to have access to the same technology. So a good example is in Glasgow, where I have a one-to-one programme across the primary and the secondary schools using iPad. And what happened was that the Glasgow Film Theatre and the Into Film organisation, who talk about film literacy, they understood that now they've got a massive community of people who could be investigating the world and creating movies and learning about literacy and reading and things through the medium of film. And because that was out there in the community, it really brought a whole new project to life, and that everyone's so excited about, and really gives young people a way of engaging with their learning. But there's also opportunities inside an organisation and within, for example, education and children's services, for other parts of your organisation to connect to young people and to families, or families who've got English as additional language. You can set up literacy programs there. You can set up your key workers to have a relationship through the technology with the young people. So what we encourage schools and educational institutions to look at is think about, now that you've established that this is where you want to go, where are all the benefits? Where can we see benefits out with of the school and out with learning and teaching? And I'm conscious that at 28 minutes past 4, we've had a really good discussion, and thank you so much for joining in with that. It's fantastic. So what I wanted to finish off on was just to think about one thing which is really important to all of us, and that's about that well-being matters. And I know as we start to go back to school, our principal concern is going to be about young people, and that they are well and they are confident and they feel safe and ready to learn, because it's only when you can do that can you really start leveraging the power of technology, when those things are in place. Can I finish off by saying thank you very much to my partners in crime across the piece, to Stuart and to Lisa and to Lee. There's only one more question about Glasgow. I think, Lee, we'll leave that up to you to maybe talk about. That's to do with infrastructure. Thank you for that, says Lee. That's very good. Can I wish the partners on screen and to everybody back in their homes or wherever you happen to be, thank you very much for joining us today, and we hope to see you again. If you want to find out more about XMA, then go and visit www.xma.co.uk, or you can contact schools@xma.co.uk to find out a little bit more about what we do to support what you want to do next. Thank you very much. Have a lovely evening. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.